Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another book review. And today I'm reviewing On the Brink, a Korean diplomat's journey for peace by Han Sung-joo, sorry. So I will explain what the memoir is, who Han Sung-joo is, and why he was an important and influential person. And what does it take to keep a war from starting when every cell phone and every phone call and every meeting could tilt the South Korean and North Korean peninsula toward crisis? Han moves from a childhood wound in wartime Seoul to the foreign minister confronting North Korea's 1993 non proliferation treaty withdrawal, and then on to an ambassador in Washington trying to steady the alliance with stops in the UN to work on issues in Cyprus and Rwanda. So he had a very full and very packed career, very interesting, colorful life. The English edition of this book is not a full translation; it's a streamlined version of the Korean book. He explains in the introduction. So this, I guess, he did this just to make the story clearer for general readers who want first-hand insight into diplomacy, crisis management, and the politics behind peace on the Korean Peninsula. So by the end of the video, you'll know the tone and the focus and whether this book belongs on your reading list. So hello everyone, I'm Barry, and this is Seoul Book Club. So Han Sung-joo's memoir, On the Brink, A Korean Diplomat's Journey for Peace, traces really an extraordinary arc from being a young boy in wartime, war-torn Seoul, when he was wounded by shrapnel and then unexpectedly helped by a North Korean soldier. And then to becoming a scholar and diplomat at the center of many of the significant events in Korea's modern history. And Han was educated at Seoul National University and then on a Fulbright scholarship in the US. He became a Korea University professor. He was a columnist for Newsweek. And then he later served as foreign minister under Kim Yong-sam. When Kim Yong-sam was president, he was foreign minister, and this was when the South Korean government were confronting or dealing with North Korea's 1993 withdrawal from the non-proliferation treaty. And at the same time, they were juggling very tense and very fraught issues with Japan. And a lot of this was to do with the opening of Korea's rice market. And anyway, he was also an ambassador to Washington under Roh Moo-hyun. He was working with the Bush administration, and this was regarding sort of Seoul's intentions towards and preventing escalation with Pyongyang. And then later, he contributed to these UN missions in Rwanda and Cyprus. And the Korean edition first appeared in 2017, and then this sort of streamlined English version appeared in 2018. And he sort of says that he shortened and clarified it for global readers. And it's a very lucid and just insightful work. It's like a first-hand window into diplomacy, crisis management, and just the hard work of keeping the peace in general. And so Han grew up in Seoul, and he came of age in the middle of crisis. So in 1950, he was 9 years old. He was a fourth grader, and the Korean War reached his street, as he puts it, as northern troops overran the capital, the South Korean capital. His family flees amid the chaos. Several family members were killed, including an aunt and a great grandfather. And he, as a young boy, so he's only 9 years old, but he was hit in the lower back by shrapnel. And he says a North Korean soldier sort of stopped and used a piece of cloth from his mother. His mother had a piece of cloth, and the soldier took the cloth and used it to stanch the bleeding. And Han says this act saved his life. And then 6 years later, he moved to New York. He went to New York, where he says he discovered English. There he connected with an American soldier through AFKN. And then he spent a formative summer, which he talks about at Camp Rising Sun in Rhinebeck. And AFKN, this is very interesting. So this was the American Forces Korea Network. So before, oh God, like NPR? Is that anyway, but this was like an early sort of American radio and TV network, and it was the U.S. military radio TV service in South Korea, and I guess it launched during the Korean War to sort of serve the U.S. troops, and then it was received by Korean audiences, many of whom used it to practice English. And then in 2001, it was rebranded to AFN Korea. And but I think in about 2008, it was the Korean cable broadcasts or like reruns or sort of replays or whatever were kind of cancelled or stopped, I think. Anyway, as for Han, by 1960, he was a junior in college, and he joined the student demonstrations of the April Revolution. The April Revolution was a nationwide student-led uprising in South Korea. Happened in April 1960, and it's credited with toppling President Syngman Rhee, Lee Seung-man's first Republic of Korea, sort of authoritarian government. And these protests were sparked by what the protesters thought was blatant fraud in the March presidential election, and the brutal suppression of protests and protesters. And the body of a teenage demonstrator was found in Masan. And after that, sort of even more students and citizens poured onto the streets on I think April 19th. And there was, the police were shooting at the protesters, but the demonstrations continued to grow. And then I think university professors joined. And I think by April 26th, he was forced to, Syngman Rhee was forced to resign. And so this movement ushered in a sort of short-lived, more democratic Second Republic, and became kind of a touchstone, a sort of moral touchstone for later pro-democracy struggles. But anyway, so Han's experiences participating in this sort of he writes about how this sharpened his conviction that scholarship and public service belong together. And so why did he choose to study politics at university? So he explains, it's very interesting, but he talks about, he chose politics because he wanted to make sense of a country in turmoil. In 1958, this was the peak of the Syngman Rhee dictatorship. There was corruption, disorder, sort of social disruption everywhere. And he resolved to study how power shapes society and how he might contribute to reform. And he majored in political science at Seoul National University. Then he won a Fulbright in 1962 to the University of New Hampshire. And he says this was an experience that broadened his perspective and sharpened his academic focus. And then after returning to Korea, he joined the Korea University in 1978, and he, built a reputation as a respected scholar. He was involved with a range of civic and professional organizations, and like I said, he was a Newsweek correspondent, and he sort of tried to, bring analysis, use his public voice to give sort of analysis on what was happening in Korea and internationally. And then after this, his diplomatic career developed, and he faced some very significant challenges, right? So his diplomatic career really sort of launched forward in 1993. So on the eve of a conference in Manila, then President-elect Kim Yong-sam invited him to dinner and asked him to serve as foreign minister. And then 2 weeks into the job, on around March 12th, I think, North Korea announced it was going to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And this plunged Han into kind of crisis management. Like, how was the South going to respond? How were they going to deal with this? And so he was sort of working closely, going between the Blue House and the incoming, I guess, Clinton administration at the time. Is that right? It would have been, yeah, the Clinton administration, right? And he had to fly off to Washington, and like this, they were even talks at the time. Was there going to be a military response? And he writes about how he met he met like China's foreign minister around this time in Bangkok, and then this sort of led to help the sort of pave the way for the U.S. North Korea talks after that. And so he was sort of dealing with that nuclear standoff, but at the same time he had two other very combustible issues to deal with, and one of those was sort of working on the ties with Japan. So around this time, there was a flare up in the so-called comfort women controversy. And then there was another issue around Korea's agricultural market with the sort of opening of the market. And so there were lots of issues to do with that as well that he was involved with. And then in 2003, after Roh Moo-hyun took office, Han was offered, and initially he was hesitant to accept initially, but he was offered the ambassadorship to the US. And he was hesitating because he thought it would be so difficult. This would be a tough role because Washington at the time, they had a more of a hardline stance towards North Korea, and Seoul was leaning softer. And he writes that this was a different experience from being a foreign minister, where as a foreign minister, he was helping set policy, but his task in Washington was to execute and explain policy. First to convince the Bush administration that President Roh was not anti-American and really wanted a strong alliance with the US, and then at the same time to sort of try and counsel restraint to North Korean provocation. So this didn't, trigger some kind of sort of military response or something like that. And so when he's writing about these things, he sort of shares some very sharp insights into the role of being an ambassador, the difficulty of sort of quiet persuasion and trust building, and how this differs from the minister's strategy and decision making. It's very interesting sort of peek behind the curtain. And then later in his career, he also worked for the UN in a couple of different capacities. He had 2 UN assignments. So the first, he was the Secretary General's special representative for Cyprus in 1996, 1997. And so he was leading like a UN office on the island. And later in 1999, he was a member of the UN Inquiry Commission on the 1994 Rwanda genocide. So, he again, this is sort of very tricky negotiating roles, and two very different sort of two very different jobs, really, two very different tasks that he had to kind of navigate. But anyway, I'd recommend this to anyone who's curious about modern Korean history, modern Korean politics, and to readers if you want a candid, ground level view of what diplomats actually do. Might be especially rewarding for students of international relations, or journalists, or policy watchers, or people like that. And it's just it's just an sort of interesting look at how decisions get made under pressure, across the US, South Korean alliance. I look at North Korean policy, Japan relations, trade, and what it takes to kind of keep these kind of plates spinning. So anyway, I thought it was very interesting and very insightful. And I highly recommend it. So thank you for watching this review of On the Brink. If you've read this one, please let me know what you thought. And if you have any recommendations for the next review, just leave a comment. And as always, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.